Hi and welcome to the Gemhawks YouTube channel. I hope you're having a beautiful day today. For the free tutorial today, we're going to learn my Magic Portal Crystal Pendant design. Now, I went through at least 4 different iterations of this design before settling on the one I'm going to share with you today, as I believe it's easily achievable and really quite pretty. So let's head down to the board and we'll take a closer look at today's project. In the first iteration of the Magic Portal Crystal Pendant design, I used a shard of black tourmaline which I encased in a very simple 1-wire wrap. I then added that to the circular portal design, and above that I used my Add a Bail design, which you can find as a video link just up here, to add a bail up to the top so that this could be connected to the neckline with any chain or threading medium of choice. And then I decided that I actually liked the spirals coming outwards, so I made attempt number 2. So for this one I decided that I would have attaching loops on the frame itself. I really like how this sat, and I hammered that frame. And as you can see, there are lobster clasps coming into some of these swirly loops at the side of the design, which I think hangs really beautifully on the neckline. I again used a piece of black tourmaline without a drill hole in a very simple wire wrap just to hold that. In the final iteration of this design, I used a double terminated amethyst point, which I had custom drilled for this design. So I really love amethyst, and I love how it looks on this design, how it looks with that raw copper. So this is the design I'm going to share with you today. The 2 gauges of wire I'm going to be using today are 1.6mm, which is approximately 14 gauge, and 0.8mm, which is approximately 20 gauge. In terms of tools, it's going to be flush cutters, chain nose pliers, and I'm going to use my memory wire finishing pliers because it gives me repeatable loops at the ends. Now, in order to not waste any of my precious wire, I'm just going to unspool some from that reel and start to warm that a little bit through. So let's check to see if that has been flush cut. That's already flush cut. So I'm going to add a loop on the ends, and I'm going to use the 4mm side of those memory wire finishing pliers to create a loop. So you need a tiny bit of extra wrist strength on this. You can helpfully warm the wire before you do that to get a little bit of extra power. Now, in order for me to create a nice round shape, I've got lots of options, but today I'm going to use something that you probably do have around the house already, and that is a tea light. You could use your round mandrels, your bracelet forms, you could use really anything that's nice and sturdy. So before I cut away from the reel, I'm just going to form a circle around whatever I have available. And you might find it helpful to just grab that end of the wire with the loop you've already created and press that against your round form. So something that isn't terribly precious for being marked would be handy. I'm then going to bring that wire all the way around to create a complete circle. Now, if I take that away from the reel for now, just to make it easier to see what's happening, I'm going to add another loop on the other end. So I want them to be relatively close together. So I'm just going to flip that reel on its side for a second and start rotating that around. Now, if I just bring that over to the side, hopefully you'll be able to see that quite nicely as I bring that wire all the way around to create a matched loop at the other end. Now, it's ever so slightly squiffy, so what I'm going to do is flip that over, and I'm going to trim flush with the pass of wire that creates that circular form. So just hold that in position and give that a snip, and then we can get that big weighty reel off the board. Now, you may need to bring your round form back into position to ensure, just a little bit of the flame there, to ensure that those loops on the end are nice and smooth. So I'm just going to pop them back on the round form. Now, it doesn't really matter if they cross over at this stage because I'm not trying to make something that is exactly that size. I'm going to be opening the form out in just a moment anyway, but if on the off chance you've mangled it slightly, you can bring that round form back in. Now, I like to have these hammered. Reason number one for that is it adds to the already strong wire we're using, but also it enables me to cover up any dinks or nicks that I might put in the wire itself. Before I hammer, I'm going to make sure that I'm super happy with how that frame sits, and I do want those two loops to be the same, so you might want to take a moment just to bring those two ends to match each other equally and opposite. If you have a round form that is slightly smaller or slightly larger, you can use that and then either slightly open or slightly close. We are looking for it to be reasonably round though, so feel free to bring that back in at any time to make sure that that is as close to round as you can get it. Now what I tend to do with this design is hammer it completely flat first, and it doesn't take a lot of effort because this is already a thick, strong wire. So I'm just going to give it a few little taps just to hold that form. So those two ends are nice and strong. And all I've done is I've just made sure that that will hold when I'm wrapping over the top of it later. So I'm also going to add just a little bit of dimpling to this design. Now I'm going to use the rounded side of my chasing hammer just to add a little bit of textural detail. You could use a larger block, but it takes up too much space on the desk. So that's all you have to do to get that little dimpled effect. I get this out of the way. You can see that's quite an attractive, it's almost like a copper pot effect. So I'm going to continue to do that off screen because it's very dull to see it over and over again, but it really does help to have those little marks on the wire because it does kind of hide any tool marks that you may create. It also gives you a way to add purchase with your second layer of wire, which we'll be adding in a moment. So as I've hammered that form, I've just supported it on either side, like so, just to make sure that it doesn't spring out at any weird angles. I've just dimpled that on one side and left the rear side flat. You could dimple both sides if you wanted to. We're going to add the next layer now, which is going to have that beautiful double terminated crystal point. For the next part of the Magic Portal Crystal Pendant design, we're going to use two lengths of wire, but one at a time to begin with, and then we'll bring them together. So let's pop the main frame down. The wire I'm going to use next is 0.8mm or 20 gauge wire, and I've got two 18 inches. I'm using raw copper. So I'm going to put one of those up and out of the way for a moment. Now in my example design, you'll see that there are no other beads other than the double terminated point. Now I've got a pair of amethyst beads here, which we're going to add in a moment to our design we're making together. But you absolutely have the option of whether or not to include those in your own design. To begin with, we're going to warm through the centre of that 18-inch length of 0.8mm gauge wire. And we're going to load on our drilled double terminated crystal. In this case, I've gone for a beautiful amethyst, and it's tapered slightly more at one end than the other. Now that does need to sit centrally on your wire. Let's pop those beads out of the way for a moment. We don't need them just yet. So I'm going to now just very gently open out this form that we have hammered together and created, which forms the main frame of the Magic Portal Crystal Pendant design. What I want to do is to ensure there is space for the top of my crystal to sit between those two loops without too much pressure, but I also want it to feel like it's made to measure, so I don't want it to be too loose. So I'm just going to very softly open that out until the crystal sits with the drill point at the nearest space possible. So that sits, but it also does just about move, which is exactly what I want to happen. So what we're going to do is take a look at the wire we're using. Now that was 1.6mm thick wire, which I've slightly smashed a little bit flatter. So what I need to do now is to leave around about a 2mm gap either side of the crystal, like so. And if I do the same on the other side, I'm making quite soft bends. Let's centralise that. That looks to be about 1.5mm available on either side, and we've turned it into this kind of weird U shape. So we're going to feed both of those tails through the loops on the main frame, and allow the crystal to come into its resting position. So that fits really, really well. And what I'm going to do now is to work one side at a time. Everything I show you on the one side, I will want to repeat on the other side. So I need to sit that crystal point so that the wire coming through the drill hole connects the frame at the two closest points, and then I'm going to bring that wire all the way around. I'm starting to the right of the crystal, and I'm going to wrap inside the loop that sits to the right of the crystal. So you will need to re-warm that wire, because every time you wrap that just a little bit tighter, it's going to get a little bit firmer. So what I tend to do is to make that first wrap on the right of the crystal. I'm going to invert it now because it's easier for me to work in that direction. If you're lucky enough to be ambidextrous, you don't have to worry about that, but I do. So I'm going to hold that in position again with the drill aperture at the nearest points of those two loops. I'm going to bring that tail of wire all the way around and then post the tail down inside the loop on the opposite side of the crystal double terminated piece. So pull that all the way through nice and tight. So we're just going to take a look at that to begin with. And what we're looking for is symmetry. So you may find that you need to move one of those wraps up or bring the other one down to make them sit so that they're equal and opposite one another. If you need a little help, you can bring those two pieces together, or equally you can spread them apart if you need to. So what I'm going to do now is just work purely on one side for the moment, and then I will repeat on the other side in just a second. So I'm going to bring that wire all the way through the centre of that frame again. I'm going to support the frame as much as I can and warm through this lovely 0.8mm gauge. I'm working with raw copper wire. I'm going to push that tail down inside that loop again, and to make sure that that sits really neatly against the first wrap. So you can see I've got two wraps on the right and one wrap on the left. So it doesn't matter how big your loop is really, but what I'm going to do is to fill that loop section with wraps of the 0.8mm wire. So I'm going to push that tail down again and pull that nice and neat. So there are 3 good wraps there. And I think if I go over the top one more time, we'll take a look and see if it will fit down inside. And I don't believe that it will. So I'm just going to bring that over to the side and out of the way. So I need now to repeat on the left of the drill aperture and try to get those to match symmetrically as much as possible. So let's warm that wire through. If you ask your wire nicely, it will try its hardest to do what you want it to do. So warm it before you pull it through the hole, and then you stand a better chance of bringing those wraps closer together and tighter. So I know I can definitely get another wrap inside that loop. So again, warming the wire before it goes through the loop, all the way through, and then I'm going to smush that up against the preceding wrap. Just keeping those as tightly together as possible. So let's just bring that over the top and out to the side so that it mirrors the first half symmetrically. Now that looks pretty decent to me. I've got 1, 2, 3 and a bit, 1, 2, 3 and a bit visible wraps, and I'm just going to make sure that they're nice and tight. And make sure that your 2 loops are equal and opposite to one another. If you need to, you can just close those 2 loops up by adapting that as you go. Now in my demonstration piece here on the left of the board, I didn't add any beads. I just went for plain wire over the top. I really like how that looks. It ties the design together. However, I thought we would add a couple of beads onto the wire this time. And again, this is 0.8mm 20 gauge wire, and it's a 18-inch length. If you plan on recreating this design but much larger than I have, remembering that I used a tea light to create the round form, you may need slightly more wire than I have allowed for. So I'm going to centralise those 2 beads and just sit that over the top and see what it looks like. I actually don't like how that looks, so I'm going to take them off, but it is an option. You can add another bead at this stage, 1 or 2 or even 3 if you've got small beads. I just thought that I would take a look at it as we're creating together, but you have an option to add beads at this stage. I'm going to remove them. It was just a thought for an alternative. So what I'm going to do is smooth and warm through the central section on that second 18-inch length of that 0.8 or 20 gauge wire. And I'm just going to sit that over the top of the double terminated crystal and just let that sit in the middle for a second. What I'm going to do is to pinch very firmly and get these wires to twin over on the right. So I'm going to warm through the one that's done lots of work already and gently warm the one which I've only just added. If I pinch that firmly with my non-dominant hand and then bring both of those wires round together, side by side all the way as you go, and bring the tail over the top. Now you need those wires to be side by side and for them to twin each other rather than them going off by themselves. So I've set that side over on the right. I'm going to flip upside down now and recreate that design on the far side of the crystal. So it's all upside down at the moment, and that's because for me moving to the right side is easier because I'm right dominant. So I'm going to get those wires to twin each other now. They're sat side by side. I'm going to do the exact same thing and pinch again if you wanted to. You could add more beads at this point. I didn't like how it looked, so I'm not going to. Pinch that firmly, push the wires around so that they sit side by side. They're not crossing over at any point, they're twinning each other. And then once you get that wrapped in, just tighten everything up and give it a little smush to seal it into position. Now what the wires will want to do is basically their own thing. They will want to wiggle around and change slightly how they sit. We want them to be exactly side by side all the time. Now there is going to be a little discrepancy as the design comes together just next to the crystal, but as we start moving around the sides of the frame, just try to ensure that everything you do on one side, you then do on the other. So we're going to start over here on the right of the crystal, pull to warm through, make sure that that's super toasty, and I'll show you that from above. What I'm doing is I'm bending it slightly forwards, then bending it slightly backwards, and then smoothing it out straight. This super warms that wire ready to work. It also means that when it cools down, it will be nice and firm. What I'm going to do now is to use my thumb and forefinger on my non-dominant hand to create a little arc shape on the edge of that hammered frame. So I'm going to take the wire from the top of the frame and I'm going to create that arc shape and draw the wire round underneath. So you can see that we've got, it's almost like a curtain swag. I'm going to pinch that again as I bring those wires all the way around the frame side by side. So we've got our first little swag in position. I'm going to push those wires through again, side by side, and create a little spiral. And I'm going to ensure that all of those wires are nice and tight side by side. I will then need to repeat that on the opposite side as symmetrically as possible. So I'm going to go again upside down for this, smushing those wires, getting them warm and toasty. If I show you that from side, you can see that that's being pushed one direction then the other. The net result of this is that you get really smooth, warm wire ready to work, and that when it cools, it will be nice and strong. So I'm going to pinch the frame again and draw both of those tails of wire around underneath, trying to generate as similar as possible a shape on the far side of that pendant design. So I'm just going to give that a quick wiggle. You could use a ruler, you could use a little bit of wire to create a stunt arc. I'm going to pinch that very firmly and push the wire all the way through. And they again need to be twinning side by side. So draw that all the way around and out to the side. If they start to cross over, tell them that that's not what you want by giving them a little gentle encourage. So I'm going to repeat this a couple of times until these wires start to get quite close, around about, say, 2 o'clock and 10 o'clock, and then I'll meet you back here in just a moment. The eagle-eyed among you may have noticed that I am wearing a very similar design to the one that we're working on together today. And what I will do is take a photograph of this and all of the other ones that I have created in the process of making today's design, and then you can pick your favourite. Don't forget to let me know in the comments down below which one you like best. Now, there's no law to say that each of these arches or little arc shapes need to be the same size. As long as they're pretty similar on opposite sides, then the pendant will look absolutely beautiful. So I've already finished the last loop over here on the right. Let's smooth and warm that wire, which is a little bit tense by this stage, one more time, and bring that around to the top of that pendant. So I've got just about enough wire space up at the top to push those wires through one more time and bring them both down. So I have a collection of tail wires up at the top, and you can just tell those to sit how you want them to. If you need to scooch them up on one side, there is a little bit of fluidity in the design. So what I'm going to do is to now trim away these wires so that they're all the same short length. And on my demonstration piece, I think I allowed about 1/2 inch, but I'm just going to trim this to the length of the shortest wire, so that I now have 4 little wires that are all the same length. Now, if you prefer to have a nice clean finish, you don't have to add any spirals at all. But should you wish to add spirals, we're just going to kind of open those up a little bit, just so that it's easier to ascertain which one is going to go where best. So I'm going to use traditional round nose pliers now to create some spirals on the rear of the design. And I'm just going to use my finger as a little bit of a backdrop to get that coil started, before switching out to my traditional bent chain nose pliers. I'm going to bring that spiral up and up and up until it sits on the back of the design. So it's sticking out, but it is on the rear of that design. All I'm going to do is push that down, and I'll do exactly the same thing on the other side. Now, these 2 little wires here, what I might do is try to ooch out that space in the middle. Not technically a word, but you can see just by putting those pliers in the center, I'm able to create a little space and bring both of those central tail wires up into the middle of the design. Now again, if you wanted to have a cleaner design without spirals, you could simply truncate just above the top and push the tails down inside the back, which actually I think I will do just as something a bit different. I'm going to put that second spiral on the back first, rotate that wire around, and then get that to sit against the rear of the design. You don't have to have this at all, you can simply cut at the back. Let's push that one down sideways as well. I'm going to bring those 2 over the top and trim away so that when I push that wire down, it will disappear at the top center of my pendant. So if I show you that on the side, you can see those sticky outy bits of wire at the top there. If I push those down with the tips of my bent chain nose pliers, like so, they will just disappear neatly out of the way. And from the front, you've just got that swag ending. There's no reason that you have to have the spirals. I'm just showing you options. I may trim those off before I take photographs today. All that you will need to do then is to have a piece of chain and decide which loop you want that to add into. So I'm going to go for not the top 2, but the next 2 out. And I'm just using some silver-plated heart-shaped chain because it's what I had and I really like it as well. If any of your little twins of wires do decide to come out of true at all, you can quite easily get them to behave. Just grip across. Now, because I'm working with raw copper, I have the option to use liver of sulphur to darken this design, but I actually really like how copper changes colour all by itself. So for me, I've got that kind of skin, which means that this will go slightly darker over the next few days anyway, but you can enhance that. And Amethyst is a really good strong stone and is quite stable usually, so there isn't often a problem. If you did want to trim away those wires at the back here, which I've created spirals for, I'll show you exactly what I mean when I say cut them. So just where that truncates towards the rear of the design, I'm just going to lift that spiral up, trim that away, and then in the direction that that wire was flowing, I'm going to chase with the tip of my pliers to make sure that it sits snugly against that frame. So I'll repeat the exact same thing on the other side in a second, and as I mentioned, I'll take a photograph of all of the different designs that I've created for this magic portal crystal pendant design. So I'll take a photograph of all these different designs, this one included, and leave that on the outro screen for you. I hope that you have enjoyed today's video. YouTube is a bit of a scary place at the moment, so your likes, hypes, shares and comments all really do help me to be seen by the wider jewellery making community. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you again soon. Bye for now.